Hey, it's Kevin DeWitt here and welcome to another plugin knowledge session. In this video, we're going to have a look at the new features of iZotope's Neutron 3. So if you're new to my channel and to my videos, if you like what you see, click the like button, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell to get notified of all of my future videos as they come out. So iZotope, at the time of recording this, or around the time of recording this, depending on when this comes out, have just released their new version of Neutron, Neutron 3. It doesn't seem like it was that long ago that I did videos on Neutron 2, so this was a bit of a surprise that this came out so quickly. I really wasn't expecting it, but there it was. And if you want to go into great detail of a lot of the features, because a lot of the features haven't actually changed, check out my Neutron 2 videos, because I really don't want to do the entire series again at this point. But obviously there is some changes and some things have been added. So we've already looked at Mix Assistant with the Track Assistant as well. I'm going to go through one of the actual new modules, which is Sculptor. So we're going to talk about what that is, and I'm going to do another video on that one. And we're just going to talk about some of the other features, because there is some things that have changed, but a lot of it is on the surface and isn't really fundamental to the way the plugin works. So if you learn how Neutron 2 works, you can use that a lot in Neutron 3. So I guess the first thing you're going to notice is the look and feel of it. Okay, they've redesigned the look, the GUI, the whole way that you do things. They've neatened it up and basically just made things a lot smoother and a lot nicer to look at and a bit more modern. Now, I personally think that they've actually done a good job on this, and I like the way it looks now. It does really actually add some workflow benefits to it. It's not just a nice fancy GUI or a fresh coat of paint. This actually does make it function differently and makes you work a lot more efficiently with it. So I like that, and I'll show you that shortly in the actual screen capture of the plugin, and we'll go through it in more detail. So as I mentioned before, the other big selling point that they've pushed in at the moment is the new module Sculptor, which is a very detailed, automatic sort of multi-band compressor that's supposed to sculpt your tracks based on some calculations on what the instrument type is. So again, we'll have a look at that. In another video, we'll actually look at that. We won't cover that so much in here. Now, they've also done some update work to their masking feature. So again, if you want to know more detail about masking and how that works in Neutron, check out my Neutron 2 video on it. But they've redesigned the layout, made it more condensed. So it's more around, it's not necessarily a change in functionality, but more around the actual GUI and the look and how to actually use it. So I'll run through that shortly as well, but that's another nice feature that they've done there. They've made it a bit better than it was before. Now, probably the biggest new feature that they keep talking about that everybody wants to know about is Mix Assistant, which again, as I said, I've just done in a previous video, gone through that. So this is the, I guess it's part of their big selling point for this plugin. And the big question is, was it asked for? Is it needed? Or did they go too far with this one? And again, I'd love to hear your comments on that in the comments. And then probably lastly, from main features point of view, they talk about making the plugin more efficient from a CPU point of view and a RAM point of view. So I'm going to try and demonstrate that and give an example and prove, have they or have they not? And what sort of results are we going to get from it? So I'm interested to see that myself. So they're the main features. There's probably other little features along the lines, but from a standout point of view, if you were going to be looking at this to, should I upgrade or should I purchase the plugin? These are the added features really that you're going to be looking for. Everything else is going to be probably not really a decision point for you. So anyway, that's enough probably talking about it. Let's just get into it and go and have a look at the actual features itself. All right, so to run through the new features of Neutron 3 as best I can, I have got a copy of Neutron 3 here, and we'll just remove everything for the moment. And what I'm going to do is going to pull up a version of Neutron 2 as well so that we can compare them side by side and just have a bit of a look. Okay, so the first thing we're going to notice is the top line is pretty much identical. We've got track assistant, we've got presets, and we've got our help and settings. We do have this setting here, which is a zero latency processing mode. So that is obviously to speed things up a bit. And then on the side here, we seem to have condensed things a little bit. So here's our Neutron 2, which is fully blown out here. We've got Neutrino in here. That seems to be gone. We still have some panning controls and stereo and phase and everything else. And swap controls. They're all just a little bit more condensed, a little bit smaller buttons. And our limiter now has moved up to this section here. We can still turn it on and off, and we still have some styles and modes. So it looks like all the same features are here on the side. They've just condensed things a little bit. You know, you got your zero latency here. It's now up here. And your limiter is now on a drop down instead of on these buttons and things like that. So they've made that a little bit smaller, which is nice, condensing it down a little bit. One obvious big difference I can see right away is that with Neutron 2, the plugin modules were predefined. Okay, they were here. This is what you get. You can move them around. You can turn them on and off, but you can't add or remove any modules. These are the modules. They are there whether you want them or not. But as you can see in here, we've gone for more of a style that suits what you get out of Ozone, which is having modules here. And we can click on here and we can add any of these modules. So we can add a compressor. We can add a second compressor. We can add an equalizer. We can add an exciter. We can add a gate. We can add sculptor. We can add transient shaper. And that's it. Okay, so we have, by the look of it, same amount of compressors, same equalizer, same exciter, same gate, same transient shaper, but we've added one extra plugin called Sculptor. Now, from a control point of view up here on the menu, all looks like be identical, other than the fact that we can remove plugins. But the actual look and feel is a lot different. So if we sort of start with our gates here, if we turn on a gate in Neutron 2, you can see all our controls are down here. We have individual settings for each of our bands. But when we look in Neutron 3, you can see we don't have this massive interface anymore. We have this section here. And we can, I guess, move things around as we so choose. We can also add extra bands in this way, which we can obviously do the same thing there. And it seems we've got the same 3-band option, but we can click in each, and to be honest with you, it has a bit of a look of FabFilter. So the functionality is obviously very much the same. It's just the look and feel is a lot neater. It's a lot more condensed and a bit more modern looking. We've got all the same sort of functionality. and features we've got, but everything's sort of in the spot over here, and you can open bits up and close them down. You've got all your same sort of settings here. You got your hold. This one's got hist on it. You've got your ratios. You've got your thresholds. You've got your release and attack. So all that stuff is pretty much the same. And, you know, you can drag things around, but they've just changed the look a little bit. This one had a separate graph up the top, but now our graph is going to be, I'm assuming, behind the screen here. So if we actually just solo this track just so we can have a look. You can see it's a much bigger graph, appearing not only here, but also here as well with our results. So we've just mixed up where the graphs go, moved them around to a more appropriate place and condensed things a bit. If we go over to equalizer, same thing again, really. It looks like we've got the same sort of just redesigned to the interface, okay? Whether it's much different or not, you'll see that things now pop up as I click through to them, as opposed to having this separate window all down the bottom here. So it's a nicer look, nicer feel, easier where it is. I mean, this little table here is quite nice, giving you the notes and everything else there. You can change your type. And again, you can expand that menu option there. And you can turn each one of them off. So obviously you've got a few options there. We can add some more bands. Okay, we seem to be up to 12 items we can add here. And I think that's pretty much on par with here because you've got 8, 2 shelves and 2 filters. So pretty much the same again, but you can obviously add and remove, whereas this one here, they're locked in there. If we go across to the compressor, again, just the redesign, taking that off the front there and locking things in as you move them around on the screen. So from a redesign point of view, I think it actually does look nice. It looks a lot more modern and nice. We've got the same, pretty much the same features through all of these so far. They look identical. Whether they sound identical, I imagine they do. And compressor 2. So compressor 1 and 2 look pretty much the same this time. So it looks like they have the same features. And compressor 1 and 2 did there as well, to be honest with you. Difference is that when you went into vintage mode, you got different meters to give you that vintage feel. Whereas here, I guess they're the same. So you don't get that vintage look with the meters that you get on here, but depends whether that bothers you or not. Our exciter, again, redesign of the look. Same features, same buttons. All looks pretty much identical, just with a new skin to it. And everything's condensed and just nicer looking. We've still got our little thing here, which we have over here, but instead of it being this big, it's this big. We've got our adjusters here so we can move things up, and our mix controls. Our transient shaper. Again, I'm predicting that it's going to be the same. And again, it is. So if you want to learn anything about any of these modules, then check out my Neutron 2 videos, because they look like they're exactly the same, just a different layout, a lot nicer looking. The big question for me personally, because I already own Neutron 2, is it worth the upgrade? Normally I do upgrade my plugins. A little bit on the fence with this one at the moment, because I'm not sure there's anything that's really selling me on upgrading except for the nice new layout. But we need to check out Sculptor, and in another video I've gone through the other big ones, which is the Mix Assistant. And then we've got Sculptor, which we can't compare because that is a new module. So obviously that is brand new, so we need to check that out. Other features are that this window here is as it is. As I said, you can't remove the modules and you can't actually rescale the size, whereas the new version can be expanded to whatever size you like, or shrunk to that size. You can't shrink it anymore. That's the smallest, but you can make it bigger. So that's a nice feature, because sometimes it's nice to be able to blow a plug-in up, especially if you work from a distance away from your monitor or using a touch screen or something like that. Now, the other big feature that they upgraded is the masking tool. So now what they're indicating is that masking is present in the same window. So whereas before, if we were to use the masking feature, and we'll put it to the same setting, so I will pick bass. We have our little graphs here, and our lines appear up here. So our view now is that they sort of appear in this same window here, trying to give you an idea of where things are. And you can sort of really line up where they are. Now, you could obviously do it on the one before, but it was sort of a separate window, so. So again, with the masking feature, it's an upgraded sort of view, but functionality-wise, pretty much the same thing. You've still got your inverse links here, so that if you want to link between the two plugins, you can. So just give you an idea of the dotted line of the opposing track. And, you know, as I reduce, it does a increase on the other track. So, and the other track would be the bass version there. Okay, so I was wondering why there was a setting missing for link in Neutron 2. But the problem was that I am actually comparing masking between Neutron 2 on this track and Neutron 3 on the bass guitar, and there's obviously a limitation that it can't do that. And when I masked, it came up like this, so it looked like it was working fine and doing everything, but there were some bits missing. So I've actually loaded Neutron 2 on the bass as well, and if I actually click on that, suddenly we get the full set of features. All right, so now we've got the EQ settings on the bass guitar, and we have the EQ settings on our current guitar. And here's where our inverse link came in. So we could get the view like this, okay? Whereas when we look in the new version with Neutron 3 compared to Neutron 3, this is the look we get now. If we do our inverse link with this button here, or even not, I thought you might be able to click on the other dotted line because the dotted line is our base. So instead of showing two separate graphs here, we've got one integrated graph, and we can actually switch between the tracks. So now I can be doing adjustments on the bass EQ within Neutron 2 on this lead guitar track. And we can turn the inverse off. And I can still be adjusting my bass, or I can switch back to my original track and make my changes there as well. So definitely a lot nicer sort of look. Now you can see when you turn the inverse link off, that dotted line disappears, but you've still got the masking elements here. So that's masking with the bass. We could cut it out. If we want to see the inverse of our bass, that's what we would have. And as I said, we can switch over, make adjustments to the bass. And even with the inverse link off, we still have the ability to switch over to adjusting the bass control, if you so want to make some changes on that side instead. We can still see our masking graph here. So definitely a nicer layout here, a bit more integrated, and probably one of the bigger changes in the plugin. Now, one of the other big features they have is that they state that you can load a lot more versions of Neutron 3 than version Neutron 2. It's a lot more CPU helpful, etc. And it's sort of going to be a hard one to test here, but I guess to give an idea, we can load up our plugin here, and we can sort of show the CPU usage. Okay, so to prove a point about the CPU, we need to compare Neutron 3 to Neutron 2. So I have actually got 22 versions of Neutron 3 on here and Neutron 3 Visual Mix on 1. And what I've done is I've just basically set them all exactly the same. I've taken Sculptor off because it's not part of Neutron 2, but I've actually turned on and loaded every single plugin that can be turned on in Neutron 2, which is the Compressor 1, Compressor 2, Equalizer, Exciter, Gate, Transient Shaper. So in our idle state, if I look at Neutron 3, we are sitting at about 27 to 28% CPU, 4 gig of RAM, and if I play it, we'll see if that changes. So it maybe goes up a percent, so up to say 29%, give or take. So if I change all of these over to Neutron 2 now and turn all those plugins on, we'll see what happens. All right, so I've loaded Neutron 2 on every single plugin except for the Visual Mix. I've just left that because I'm not really counting that in this, and I've turned on each of the plugins again. Okay, and what we have now is, again, about 4 gig of RAM, so that doesn't seem to have changed. We're actually sitting at between 19 and 20%, which is unusual because they claim that they've improved the CPU, but by my calculations, their Neutron 2 is actually lighter on CPU. Let's play the song and see what that does. Okay, we seem to be sitting between about 20 to 22%. Again, that is about 7% CPU load lighter. So I'm a bit perplexed as to what is different and why they claim that one of the big improvements of Neutron 3 over 2 is the CPU load when it doesn't seem to impact at all. Where potentially the CPU load may come into play, and this is a bit of a guess, we could test this, is that we can remove modules from Neutron 3. So maybe that's a good test. What we should do is let's see what the impact is if we only, say, have an equalizer on. So I'll turn off all the other modules. And we'll just have the equalizer. We'll do that on every track. Okay, so on every track now we've got Neutron 2 with just an EQ on. All the other modules are bypassed. Obviously can't be removed in Neutron 2. And our CPU load is sitting at about 9 to 10%. And if we play the song, a little bit of fluctuation, but really not a big change, 10 to 12% maybe. Now let's see what happens if we put Neutron 3 back on and actually remove all the modules except for the equalizer. All right, so we have Neutron 3 on every track with just an EQ. I've removed the other modules, so not just turned off, they're actually removed. And our meter now says that we are sitting at about 7% and 2.7 gig of RAM. And if we play the track, about 7 to 8% roughly, give or take. So unless I've done something wrong here to my calculations, the improvements that iZotope are claiming around the plugin is around the design and that you can remove modules. If you fully load the modules, then Neutron 3 actually uses more CPU load, about the same RAM. So the big difference here is that Neutron 2 can't remove the individual modules. You can only bypass them, so they're still used. So the RAM stays the same no matter what modules you have turned on. It still uses about 4 gig of RAM in my situation here. The CPU does drop, but it does not drop as significantly as Neutron's 3 does by removing the modules. So just keep that in mind. The CPU performance and the RAM performance being improved in Neutron 3 is about the flexibility of actually removing modules. So as long as the assumption is that you're not going to load every module on every track and you're going to use some features on one, some features on another, then technically it will be improved over Neutron 2, but if it's fully loaded using all of the same amount of plugins, same amount of modules, then technically it actually doesn't really work any better. It actually potentially could be worse. So that CPU thing may have been a slight detour, but it's just that they did proclaim this as a new feature and a new thing that come out in this plugin. So that's pretty much most of the new features. As I said, it's mainly a new skin with a few features there. And there's the sculptor plugin, which I'm going to do in a separate video because it is a totally new module, so it deserves its own video. So check that out shortly. So there you go. There's the new features of iZotope Neutron 3 over what was already there from Neutron 2. Let me know what you think. Do you think it's worth upgrading? To be honest with you, I'm still on the fence about it. One of the biggest selling points for this plugin upgrade really is the Mix Assistant, and as I've talked about in the previous video, I'm not even a fan of it, and I probably wouldn't even be using it. So here's a dilemma for me, who usually, to be honest with you, I usually upgrade my plugins and I go with the new versions. I'm not really sure with this one. I really like the new look. I like the workflow, so maybe it's worth upgrading for that alone. And Sculptor itself, as I said, I'm going to talk about that in another video, but it's not a disaster sculptor. I can see the point of that. But there's also a reason, which I will talk about in the next video, of why Sculptor to me is also not necessarily something I need or need to pay for, because I already have another plugin that I own that does a similar function. And as for the CPU improvements and the RAM improvements, I think, unless my testing is totally wrong and I've missed the point, and if somebody can tell me that I have and I've done it all wrong, please let me know, because I would love to be wrong about this, but I don't really see the improvements so much other than the ability to remove the modules, etc., which is good. I mean, that, it's handy in itself. If you want to put Neutron on every track, but you don't want to run every module, then great. Yes, that is a great feature. But I think I think they've done a little bit of trickery to say that the plugin is more efficient. It's just redesigned to work smarter than before. It doesn't seem that they've actually really functionally reduced the CPU load, other than to allow you to cut down what you do in the plugin. But again, maybe I did something wrong with my test, so let me know. Love to be corrected on this, because I hate to see plugins that say one thing and maybe they don't quite deliver on what you think they should. So to me, whether I upgrade, as I said, I'm on the fence. I'd love to hear everybody's opinion on what they think. Do they think it's worth the upgrade if you already own Neutron 2 or not? If you don't own Neutron 2, do you think it's worth buying it altogether? I'd love to hear your opinion, because, as I said, I'm on the fence, because primarily for me, especially after you watch my Sculptor video, you'll see that I would probably be only upgrading for the new GUI and the new layout. And is it really worth $99 for that function? I'm not quite sure. So I haven't actually made a decision yet at the time of recording this video. So if you liked the video, click the like button, subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell to be notified of all my new videos as they come out. Hopefully this has been helpful. I thank you for watching, and I will catch you in the next video.